Greetings, fellow armchair Imagineers. Tiki here.
And BlueDragonFive.
And happy 4th of July, everyone, and welcome to our annual 4th of July retrospective on, I don't know, just something patriotic. Dragon, is that a thing we do? Is that like kind of a tradition? If it's not, it should be, god damn it.
When we're able to do it, then yes, we do try to do something patriotic on the 4th of July.
All right, so Dragon, what's more patriotic than Superman?
I mean, short of Captain America, you're going to be hard-pressed to find something as patriotic as Superman, folks.
So, what's even more patriotic than Superman is taking a look at Superman through a unique lens, which is kind of a parallel of the immigrant experience and the American dream and what that represents, the literal alien of it all that is Superman. And that's all reflected, folks, in the 2015 work, Max Landis's 7-issue run on Superman, which is American Alien. And Dragon, just to give an upfront thesis statement on me, I read this in one sitting, basically. Like I read issues 1 and 2 last night, but then I kind of sat down, I reread it. Like I reread issues 1 and 2 along with the whole thing, and to me, it just flew by. It was like I read it in about 2 hours. It flew by. Everything's kind of the one thing is we're gonna have to kind of just. I guess the issues are distinguished enough, but this is a really interesting kind of take on it. But the thing of it all is, it's kind of like it's got a really interesting structure to it, Dragon. It definitely has some really interesting patriotic themes that we'll get into. Like I said, the two big heavy-hitting themes is patriotism and immigration. Of course, two themes these days that don't really necessarily seem to line up in the headlines, but, getting around kind of that dicey territory and kind of the won't you be my neighbor style of it all, kind of the let's embrace each other quality. I feel like this is a appropriate topic to go into. So, Dragon, overall, I gotta say, I like it a lot. I think this is a case of, like, I've been overhyping this for myself for years now. I really wanted to look into it. I wanted to get a hard copy before a hard copy even existed, and then my comic books shop sold out of hard copies, and so ultimately I got around to getting a Kindle version. Yes, I paid for the Kindle version so I could get the most high-quality experience possible and own it, because I knew it was going to be worth owning. And I gotta say, Dragon, it fell a little bit below my expectations, but my expectations were pretty sky high based on the build-up and the hype. So I still like it a lot. I still think it's a very appropriate pick for a 4th of July retrospective, especially given the anniversary that Superman had this year. We just did the 3-hour retrospective on Supes. So I think this is going to be kind of like, how The Incredibles has the making of, Dragon, this is going to be like the more making of for Superman. It's like, let's look into Superman even more, darn it.
Absolutely.
All right. How do you feel about this one, Dragon? Because I remember you telling me about it right when it was coming out, like issue by issue.
Oh yeah, I got a great love for American Alien. It was when it came out. Of course, Max Landis is very well known for Chronicle.
Yeah, Max Landis. Dicey in other areas, but I think Dragon and I can both agree that out of all the stuff that's actually gotten produced by what he's written, Chronicle is something that I really like, and Chronicles is another thing that kind of shares some parallels between, where it's kind of a more grounded, more kind of a real-world take on the superhero genre without necessarily being quote-unquote dark and gritty.
Yes, certainly. I mean, Max Landis is somebody who I love. I love the way he pitches his stories. He's one of the excellent storytellers, if you will. I mean, the guy knows how to pitch a story, and I've always loved that about him. And of course, then Tiki kind of turned me on to Chronicle, which Max Landis wrote. And again, the guy's a very competent writer. And when I heard that he was, again, from the pitches, he's famously has pitched some really good Superman stories, some really good Superman ideas, and learning that, oh my God, Max Landis finally got to publish like a big Superman story. Like he had done like an issue of Superman once, so like kind of like an anthology series, and now this is finally like kind of a big story for him. It's like him kind of taking the ball and running with it. My main thesis, ever since I read American Alien, I still feel this way. Bear in mind, situations have changed in comics these days, but I still feel this to be true, that American Alien was what I wanted from Superman when the New 52 was announced. Like, this is exactly the take on, if you're going to do a new take on Superman, you're going to kind of reboot Superman loosely. Basically, let's not go loosely. Let's go for like something that is true to the character. Yeah, basically, what if we took an Elseworlds concept, like a reimagining Elseworlds concept, and we ran with it and we stuck with that? I'm saying if we're gonna, because this is like this is just adding extra really cool layers to the Superman story that doesn't really change anything major about him, yet celebrates that character. This is a good, refreshing, human take on Superman. And the big thing with this story is this is a Clark. It's a Superman that is, it's less Superman, it's more Clark Kent story. And of course, I think at the end of the day, we love that Clark Kent side of Superman. It's always great to give that its due. And I think in a long time, this is the first main Clark Kent centric story we've gotten in comics in a very long time. So this is very, so again, I was very high on this, and I really wish we do more stuff like this with Superman in the comics. I hear that Brian Michael Bendis is on the book now, and I haven't read any of that, but I'm sure that might be a kind of a good, kind of another kind of possible kind of renaissance for Superman after a while, because Grant Morrison was kind of the last big heyday for Superman, and Landis here kind of followed in Morrison's footsteps, like kind of how to kind of celebrate the fact that Superman is cool, So I guess some backstory then.
Yeah, go ahead.
Here's the story. Here's how we get this book, folks. So, of course, Max Landis famously loved Superman, and again, being the master of the pitch that he is, he did these two short films, like these two short YouTube videos called Regarding Clark and The Death and Return of Superman, in which one, he lays out a pitch for basically how he feels about Superman, like how to do a Death and Return of Superman story, as well as reenacting the Death and Return of Superman. It's real silly. It's over the top. And even Foggy Nelson, Eldon Henson is in it too. You got a lot of like Mandy Moore, Eldon Henson, like a lot of like big, some relatively big names are in that short. Like, Eldon Henson plays Doomsday, and he looks ridiculous, and it's hilarious. So, and it basically it's very similar, like something like Drunk History. That's kind of what it's similar to, the way he kind of laid out that story. So the point is, those videos got a lot of traction. Again, kind of get him to other things in his career. And DC, they got wind of this and they loved it. And Max Landis like, hey guys, can I write a Superman story for you? And based on like, oh my god, yeah, this guy knows Superman, get some. We should, let's give him a story. So basically, the game what essentially amounts to an Elseworlds take, where again, it's not in the main continuity, even though it should be. Trust me, folks. This thing would have really been welcome when they were trying to do up Superman, right? That's
Dragon. Basically, another thesis statement I have for this thing is, I very much got a vibe that this is what Nolan was trying to do, or just Snyder and Nolan and whoever else was involved. This is basically what Man of Steel should have been like.
Exactly. This is how you retell the story of Superman. I really feel that way. I really feel this is like, I echo exactly what you're saying, Tiki. Less the Nolan side of it, but yes.
I know.
Absolutely. I think this is I agree with you. I think this is what Snyder was kind of going for. Like, we have like a human side.
This basically feels like if Nolan actually did Man of Steel instead of Snyder.
Yeah, but it's definitely a little bit more comedic. So I hesitate on the Nolan, but in terms of like the to equate the storytelling, yes, it is kind of a Nolan take on a proper Nolan take on a Superman story from the story.
I'm just saying we have a lot of playing around with the timeline in traditional Nolan fashion.
And yes, that definitely feels like a Nolan stamp right there. Yes. Anyway, right. So the sell of the series was Max Landis would write as each issue of the 7. I think initially he wanted to do maybe 8 issues, and they kind of 8 or 10 issues, and they scaled them back to 7. And it was basically to do a story about Clark as the focus, and we'll do a different artist each issue. So that was kind of the big sell. Like, yeah, we'll get a different artist each issue. It'll be cool. And each chapter, while having a different artist, also has a different theme and a different experience in Superman's life. And of course, you'll notice each title of each comic / chapter, it's something with wings. Like, we start with birds, and we get the other famous things with wings. Again, it's kind of a building. It's kind of a building momentum in each chapter. So it does kind of go chronologically, but kind of amps it up each time.
Mm.
So Landis. And again, I want to make it clear, folks. Now, we're going to be threading some stuff here with, again, the 4th of July of it all and the American. Again, you got to imagine you call the story American Alien because you want to say something about America to some extent. Now, Landis hasn't really said if that was intentional or not, so I can't. We might just a lot of it might be us reading into it, but you got to imagine if you're going to call an American Alien, you put it together. Okay, if Superman's truth, justice, and the American way, we're going to see how the American way impacted Superman and vice versa. So I think that's what this story is about, even though again I can't substantiate that. So I think that's something that's worth exploring in each of these kind of chapters. So it's something to kind of keep track of.
Cool.
And I guess lastly, two things. One, of course, Landis, he always views Superman and Wonder Woman as the big challenges to write. Because again, people always say, every Superman story's been done. Superman's a played out character. You can't do anything new with Superman. Landis proved him wrong on that one. And the other thing, really interesting thing I found is that DC, they pretty much, again, they let him have, because it's essentially an Elseworlds book, essentially. They let him have free reign on it, like do whatever you want to with Superman. There are a lot of changes to the Superman mythos with like certain characters and things in this series, like kind of some new, fresh ideas, again, especially with Clark. But DC had two rules, just two rules, like two little limitations for him. One, Superman can't curse in a big way. Let's say he can't drop the F-bomb. Clark can, Superman cannot drop the F-bomb. Even if it's censored, he cannot drop an F-bomb. And secondly, in the costume, as in Clark Kent can look foolish, but Superman in the costume cannot look foolish. Like those were the two rules for from DC. Everything else was free reign. They can do they can go wild. You can recreate. Just we can't violate those two little rules.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the background in a nutshell. So let's dive right into issue number one. Issue number one is Dove.
All right, let me get to it.
Just the highlighter artist here in our themes. The artist was Nick Dragotta. I believe that's how you say it, Nick Dragotta. And this story, of course, the main focus of thematically, this story is about fatherhood. It's about Jonathan Kent.
Yes, and I'm sorry, Dragon, but to drag the parallel out to Man of Steel, far better Pa Kent than the one we get in Man of Steel.
Ordinarily, I'd fight you on that, but in this case, I can't refute that. Yeah, this is a far better Man of Steel. But yeah, this is how you should do that.
All right, so right away, Dragon, I guess, like you said, we're not sure just how much of it is intentional or not, but one of my favorite lines early on is the line about the alien police and, well, Clark, the alien police, that might not be so spot on, like that might actually be something that happens to you. You have to be careful.
Right. So in this issue, we have seen Clark as a real kid dealing with powers and not knowing where he's from. I love how that's kind of a recurring plot theme.
It's very Heroes-esque.
It is, and again, I love that we do have payoff to this. I love that, again, here's the thing. These are good one-and-dones, if you really need it to be a one-and-done. They're really good kind of like, anthology pieces from Clark Kent's history. By the same token, if you line them up, they do track and they do pay off, like the whole where's he from? He doesn't know, and we see, we see, the Kents unearthing him, and they're kind of haunted by that, like how they said this kid landed in their laps. And of course, there's a great payoff to that even at the end of this issue. So again, we do have a lot of great stuff there. But I love how we're not adhering to the traditional kind of like the Donner hallmarks that we all know and love. But we're playing with them and we're subverting them to a degree.
Yeah. Right. They're definitely there, but they're not like, it's not kind of like in the Superman Returns kind of way of like, all right, here's the hallmarks. Let's just kind of go down a checklist of them.
Yeah, it's like there's no green crystal to tell him that he's from Krypton in this. It's like he's going to learn that through really unconventional, really clever means by issue 7.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. So we have this great. So again, Max Landis really has a good. We have a good beat on how to make good kid dialogue in this story. Like he has like the repetition of a kid. He feels real guilty for.
I really like his rant about. I'm sorry, I'm kind of skipping ahead in the. I'm kind of jumping around in the timeline of this, but I really like his kind of excited rant about we don't have to pay for vacations anymore. We can go anywhere.
It's really interesting that in the graphic novel, like in the trade paperback version of this, At the end of the book, they show you like Max Landis's pitches for each issue, and like kind of tells you like thematically and tone wise what he's going for. And what's so funny is this first issue, the tone he was at least again outlined by him personally, what he was going for with this first issue is a Pixar kind of tone.
Oh,
He
interesting. Huh.
So this first issue is supposed to be kind of the warm and Pixar kind of tone. And I got to tell you, with that ending, it feels like Dash almost, like kind of Dash, like kind of like, yeah, impressing Bob at the dinner table. Like, how fast were you going? It feels like something, something like that. It feels like an actual kid like going a mile a minute. Like, oh no, we don't have to, we don't have to answer now, but let's just, we'll plan on some family vacations because I can fly now.
I can just hold up the car and you guys can just sit in the car and I can just practice getting stronger and stronger and it'll work.
Yeah. And we have this again for the Man of Steel parable here, real quick. So we do have a great conversation with Jonathan Kent, where we see that Kent sees he's in over his head, but he's protecting his family without hindering Clark's optimism and worldview. It's not it's not necessarily like maybe you shouldn't have saved those people. It's not exactly that conversation, It's
oh God, no, far from it.
But yeah, I mean, I love the balance that we're striking with Pa Kent here, where he's a real father and he's seeing that his kid's different, and there's a balance to strike.
Mm-hmm. And I guess again with the Man of Steel parallels, I guess one of the fun things with Man of Steel was the flying scene, where Henry Cavill actually cracks a smile. But the flying hero dragon is handled very well, and it's the most heroes-esque thing because at first it's kind of like one of those like, oh my God, like if this happened in real life, it'd actually be kind of terrifying. But by the end of it, as we said, getting into a whole rant about all the family vacations they could have and everything, it's very liberating.
Yeah, I mean, I love how we start the issue where he's out of fears, out of instinct, again, not knowing how to rein in his powers, he's flying, and his mother's hanging on to him for dear life, comforting him. But again, if this kid panics, I mean, she could be dead.
Yeah, it's a very bold way to open the story.
So there were two things in the first chapter here that sold me on on Max Landis's take here. One, my favorite idea, honestly, might be my favorite idea, short of some stuff in another issue. I think one of my favorite issues in the entire story is I love the ET idea. I love how Clark goes to this drive-in movie and he sees ET for the first time, and it wigs him out. And again, it's the pair. It's a no-brainer that you never thought of. Yeah, if Superman saw ET as a kid, he would freak out at that. Of course the scene he's watching is the whole the government comes in, and it's the thing that that behind the scenes he doesn't know about this, but his parents have been contemplating like the whole.
And of course that pulls one of my favorite editing tricks, which is the dialogue of the movie happening, kind of reflecting what's going on screen. Recently, we saw that with The Incredibles 2 and a really good scene that I keep going on about.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, we have that really great, striking image of Clark looking in the bathroom mirror, and he sees himself with like an ET face.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So again, I mean, this is the kind of storytelling that really.
Dragon, I feel like that ET face. It's not just immigrants. I feel like just saying immigrants is kind of selling short. I feel like Landis is kind of like capturing the human experience as a whole with this alien thing.
Well, here's
not to get too personal with it, but we all feel like an outcast. Like that's one of the things. Getting older, like I'm crouching towards 30, try to get from turning 30 myself, and one of the things that comes from age is realizing that the feeling of being an outcast is a universal thing. It's something that even the most perfect seeing of people go through. And I think Landis captures that feeling perfectly and illustrates that with what the Superman character represents, and the opportunity that the Superman character gives to you in a writing format like that.
Well, the thing that really jumped out to me with kind of the American experience in this chapter was the kind of the small town quality of it all, where it's we see Smallville as a really close-knit community where, there are neighbors who know about Clark. Pete Ross, his friend, he knows about Clark. Again, like there are witnesses things, and some of them are going to put pieces together. And a lot of them, again, there's a sense of community where they all want to protect Clark. So I'm just saying, I think we're seeing like kind of we have this balance of, again, there's a bit of paranoia with the ET thing. With the ET thing, we introduced that there is a danger for the things that we don't understand, for again, the fear of kind of immigrants and such. And by the same token, there's also a great sense of community and family. And again, like the people who are like raising the serious concerns are helping Jonathan get him down in the plane.
Mm-hmm.
And again, just with that whole ET idea too, it feels very Brad Bird-esque. I got a real Brad Bird vibe from this first issue.
And of course, Dragon, after the Iron Giant, we've always pitched that Brad Bird should do something Superman related.
Oh my God!
Didn't we pitch the? Oh my God! I want to will this into existence, so I'm going to bring it up again. A Brad Bird directed Superman movie in the style of the Fleischer cartoons. Dragon, that's all I want out of life right now.
Oh, that would be great.
All right,
let's see. I'm trying to see if there's anything major here. So again, we have kind of the lived-in community of Smallville. We got.
Do we have early childhood set up with Lana Lang here, or does that kind of start happening in issue 2?
No, it's here too. He's seeing the movie with Lana. He's a crush on Lana, where he sees like, is Lana gonna be there? It's like, Clark, take it down a notch, man.
Right.
I remember he's asking, hey Lana, you don't think they'd really do something like that, do you? While watching ET, and of course he levitates. Everyone just writes off it's a gas pocket. But yeah, I mean, I guess so again, there are two things that really sold me about this whole series in the first issue. So one was the ET scene, which gives such a brilliant idea. It's like, yep, how we've never done that. And again, that's Americana too. Again, kind of the American parallel here. Again, when you think of one of the greatest movies, one of the most nostalgic movies, one of the ones that would, especially, I'd imagine. Look, I've never really put it together, but I imagine Kansas would probably be popular in Kansas especially, with all like the cornfields and everything.
Sure, I'll go with that.
No, I don't mean just for that reason. I'm just saying, like, if you're a kid, you're watching that, again, like, you could discover ET in the fields too.
I mean, by that logic, Signs would be popular in Kansas.
Well, again, I'm talking quality movies here.
Hey, I like parts of Signs. Signs is like part of a good movie.
Okay, the point is, I'm just saying ET again. Like when we think of American cinema, we think of ET. Therefore, it's a no-brainer.
All right, sure.
The other thing, though, was those are so we have 5 backup stories out of our 7 here, and the backup story is like a page-long extra story that is kind of like a perfect kind of capper to each story. That complements the story and kind of facilitates from one story to the next. So the big one, this is the other sell point for me, your Castaways. So Tiki, what did you think of the big kind of collage ending? The basically the Kryptonite rock, all the little news clippings and everything.
Yeah, I mean, it was cool. I don't think I'm as like wowed by it as you are. It wasn't something that really was like, oh my God, now this is what the series is. But to me, it kind of was just like, okay, this is a nice encapsulation of what's going on at this point in time. I'm sorry, Dragon. I'm not quite as wowed by it as you are, but it was a nice capper to it, as you said.
I mean, one I love. It's like this one-page storytelling and all the clutter.
It's a nice kind of foreshadow to the Clark Kent reporter of it all. You know what I mean? I like that element of it.
Sure. And also, what I really liked about it too, it's very Watchmen-esque. It's like when
yes.
Yeah, it's very Watchmen-esque. But here's the great thing about it, though. I love that it tells a story, because if you look through the news clippings, it tells you the story of Jonathan and Martha Kent before Clark Kent came around. It's about how they fell in love, and like they met at the Haley Circus. They went to the circus together, which of course is the same circus that Rob. And again, this is a great foreshadow too, because Dick Grayson is in the story later on. Mm-hmm. So there's like all these little great Easter eggs and the little things to pick apart there. And the main story is that. And this is something that sometimes has been part of the mythos of Superman, is I like that we kind of put that here, but we kind of did it in a way we hadn't before, where in the news clippings you see that Martha was pregnant and they had a miscarriage because of a car accident. And again, we paid this off in the next issue of why Martha is glad to have Clark in her life. But the point is, we get a kind of a little picture and like a little snapshot that this really this poignant tragic, we kind of hit this tragic button of the miscarriage with the Kents, and of course they, through the loss of one life, they had all this new life through Clark, and kind of the life that Clark's going to give them, through kind of this kid that kind of fell into their laps when they needed that hole filled. So it's kind of a, I don't know, it's kind of a beautiful, like, little one-page narrative, I thought.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, let's talk about issue number 2, Hawk.
Okay, one sec.
Hawk by Tommy Lee Edwards, and the theme of this issue is Ma Kent, otherwise known as Martha.
Martha, why did you say that name? Sorry, I had to get one in there.
I think of the Deadpool 2 reference to Martha. It's still pretty funny.
I'm good. All right. So I really, this issue definitely had one of the most heartfelt sequences for me, which comes right at the end, but kind of building that. Again, Dragon, I'm sorry, but Better Man of Steel is going to be the theme of this conversation tonight. I don't know what to tell you, because every step of the way, like, kind of beat by beat, it's sort of like, yep, the teenage years, the young adult years, they cover it. They cover, like, kind of potential risks of getting in over his head and getting in trouble with the law. That's all very well handled. It's kind of like a checklist, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So, let's see. Before we really dive into it, let's talk about, like, the title. I like how the titles, again, we're building on winged things, and I love that, Hawk and Dove are, it's kind of a thing that goes together a lot. Like, there's even, like, characters in the comics who are named Hawk and Dove, like they're kind of a duo. And I like that. One, it's kind of something that complements, again, if we did a story about Dad, now we're doing a story about Mom, therefore, Hawk and Dove. And also, I like that it's the Hawk is more feral and protective, and it reflects that the stuff that's in this issue is really gritty, and that's the tone that's being kind of struck with this one. It's kind of a gritty, almost. It's like it's kind of like Smallville at its grittiest, almost.
Yeah, I'm sorry, really quick. Just want to point out, folks, for the authenticity purposes, you might be hearing fireworks because it's getting right around sundown in my area, and we're recording this on the 4th of July. So, hey, kind of adds a bit of realism, I guess. What can you do? Not much I can do about that. Anyways.
So this issue really fleshes Clark out. It establishes, like, again, things are definitely going to pay off. Like, we really established Pete Ross here. So Pete we saw briefly in the previous issue, but we have a little bit more with Pete and Lana. We really don't do as much with Lana that you'd expect, because usually when you think of, like, the girlfriend from the early years before Lois came around, you're thinking Lana Lang. But we do, like, issue 3 really shakes that up in an interesting way. So, Pete Ross, honestly, I love the way they do Pete Ross here and later on. He feels like Foggy Nelson.
Pete Ross, he's, again, from Man of Steel, right? He's the kid that Clark rescues from the bus, the bully.
Yeah, and again, he's a classic Superman character, too. Again, he's like, you're right, though. He is from Man of Steel, yeah.
Okay.
So, and he's very Foggy Nelson-esque to me. Did you get any of
that? Definitely Foggy Nelson in Daredevil Season 2. But a little bit more supportive, where he's like, look, man, what you're doing is dangerous, but at the same time, I can't really argue that, like, you're kind of impervious to pain, so I can't really, like, danger is sort of a moot point in your lifestyle, I guess. So more power to you.
So, let's see. Also, in this issue we established the vulnerability effect. So again, one thing Landis really wanted to do with Superman here was he wanted to show, like, a more vulnerable Superman than you've ever seen before, and he just wanted, like, a version of Superman that could get hurt a little, basically could get hurt. And the simple way of explaining it is, and again, you could always just, like, throw his head and say, okay, well, it's a different Superman. Again, that by all means that's valid. It's just like a Superman who is basically, it's like a Bob Parr thing, where he can get hurt, but it's going to take a lot to get him hurt. Or like I think the other way of looking at it, you could do the Bob Parr approach, or you could do the Luke Cage effect, where it's like, he is bulletproof, but like, still, if you get, like, close enough to the guy with a shotgun, you could dislodge some bones, and it's the Force could, the Force, he could still suffer internal injuries, that sort of thing. That's kind of how I read it.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for this would be most likely, because he's in his younger years. Like, he'll build up more tolerance with the sunlight and everything. He'll get stronger as when he becomes like a full-fledged Superman. These are kind of the in kind of the Smallville kind of Superboy years he's kind of in right now. So, and of course, also he's not using his powers smart because again, now he really uses his powers in this issue. Like he uses the heat vision and the super strength and everything. And again, Superman, classically he uses his powers very smart. It's like the idea this guy could kill everybody with like a snap of his fingers, not like the other guy. He could kill everybody with like a flick of his fingers, more accurately. But in this case, he's run a little bit more wild, and he causes some severe damage while not meaning to. Just out of instinct, he does some really reckless stuff here. And again, you can get away with that because it's very early. He's not even putting on a suit yet.
I mean, it's reckless, but at the same time, Dragon, it's justified at the same time.
It is, because these are really bad guys he was going up against. And again, that's really the gritty Smallville parable. It feels like kind of like, I guess, Heroes / Smallville here, where it's sort of this, it's a really small story of like just some convenience store robbers who were just really kind of violent, and they gunned down. I believe it was either Pete's uncle, or like a friend of a really close relative friend of Pete Ross's, and that's why he's like telling Clark, you gotta get involved here. And yeah, so I think that's another thing we kind of do here with the American parable here, where we're seeing kind of like what we saw in the previous issues, like kind of a friendly small town vibe. We're seeing like as the years go on, we're getting it's the culture that's getting more violent. So I think we're seeing kind of violence and kind of brutality and just grittiness as like kind of America kind of delved into over the years. Especially like a New York setting, for example. Of course, the '80s, and I mean we kind of set up that. Again, if E.T.'s being played, it could have just been like a repeat, but for all we know, it's like maybe like like that was Clark in the '80s, like around '83, I guess, '82, '83.
Sure.
Again, this is maybe like like a few, like maybe like 5 to 10 years later. So the point is, like Smallville, it's kind of America, kind of like the safe kind of happy days, times are no more. I guess that's kind of what we're saying with this issue.
I feel like the '80s in many ways are the new '50s. It's kind of like the Back to the Future effect.
Sure. I mean, yeah, but of course, again, '80s New York. That's what gets us, Batman Year One. That's where you get like the grittiness of the streets. So, like, certainly, on the whole, we reflect of the '80s like that. But if you're in a city in the '80s, it was not a pretty picture.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. So, I guess I love that getting to our ending. We have this beautiful little shooting star scene. I call it with Martha.
And this is what I was kind of talking about. One of my favorite scenes here.
So, Clark, he basically did what he had to. He was saving a family that was taken hostage. The idea is like these were like some violent robbers who went back home, and it was like kind of
basically
like a mess.
Like, what if Jesse Pinkman was a really bad guy when he went home and faced his parents in season 2 of Breaking Bad?
Exactly. Like, that's the thing. So he's trying to go home again, like trying to like force his way back into the family, and basically took them hostage, which caused Clark to intervene, and thankfully Pete saved his bacon because again he got shot twice, which kind of dislodged some bones and kind of really again he really got hurt here, and he might have been in some mortal danger for all we know. Again, like if they've shot him in the right place, they could have like cracked a bone, like fully like crack the skull open if they shot him in the head. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
So the point is, we do have some aftermath where, hence the image before us, folks. He did get into not legal trouble necessarily, but the sheriff, again, yet another person who's in the loop. And again, there's still like that great sliver of a kind of small town. Again, there's a real small town quality with Smallville that everybody kind of knows that Clark Kent is a little different than everybody else. But, we got to, I respect the family, therefore I don't want to get him in trouble and send them to the, send them to like scientists who might kind of pull an ET on him,
Mm-hmm.
So Martha, she's voicing her concern over what has happened, and over his kind of Clark maybe, because he did laser a guy's arms off, again, out of self-defense, mind you.
That is a very Heroes-esque scene, the whole, the birth of the laser vision. It's kind of like a body horror, kind of just like, oh my God. You know what I mean? Just like, oh, geez.
And I did read it that those guys survived, but they did not survive well. Because I mean, he like threw a guy, he was gurgling blood. But I mean, again, he
But
could
to be fair, these guys are much more justified for a horrible like after effect than a couple jerks in a bar.
True. Anyway, so what stands out to you about the Martha?
Go ahead.
What stands out to you about the Martha scene?
Oh, I just really like the line about worrying about her son versus, at first I just couldn't help but thinking what would have happened to you if something drastic would have happened, like you illustrated, like the crack in the head with a bullet or anything. But then she
Yeah.
keeps thinking about, her mindset kind of switches over and she's like, but actually, what I can't stop thinking about is what would have happened to that family if you hadn't been there. And to me, Dragon, that just kind of illustrates like the acceptance that mothers of firefighters and policemen have to go through. You know what I mean? And that very much represents the American experience for me, kind of like the sacrifice of any person who puts their life on the line. And I just thought that was such a beautiful contrast at 17 years old for Superman and his mother to kind of come to that sort of mutual agreement of, I might not like what you're doing, but I see the necessity in what you're doing. And I see that you can't just turn away from it.
Sure, sure. And I like that this is a really clever reversal of the classic, Clark and Jonathan Kent scene. Now, again, whether if this for the movie comparison here, again, this is like a thing it's always in Superman, but if you want to look at the film comparisons, of course, Man of Steel, let's not get into that, but classically you look into the Clark and Jonathan Kent scene from the Donner Superman, the whole like, son, I just know you are here for a reason. This is kind of a softer, kind of reinventive kind of version of that. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I love that the Donner version of that scene, to pieces. I do, but this is kind of a neat sort of again, kind of a quieter, kind of more maternal acceptance, as you're saying. And the line that really stuck out to me specifically about it was the whole. We saw that Jonathan was kind of unsure of like how to proceed with Clark. Again, he was kind of flying by the seat of his pants, hoping for the best. But again, they kind of found this kid and they adopted him. And again, there are obviously going to be questions if he's doing, if his powers are going haywire. And there was a fear of like, I'm not. I mean, we found him, and he was kind of. Definitely, we know that he's an alien. We're not sure exactly how do we raise a kid like this. And the idea is like, Clark. At times, he might have heard whispers of like kind of dissent and like, like Martha, I don't know what I'm going to do with this kid. And Clark voices that to his mother here, where again she says, why can't you act like a normal teenager? And that really kind of bothered him. And he's saying, do you two ever wish you hadn't found me? Because I hear you guys kind of worrying from time to time. And Martha assuades his fears by saying, Clark, I wish for you. You're the shooting star in my life, essentially, which is such a beautiful idea that again, this kid who came from the stars was kind of her. Again, this couple who lost a child, essentially a shooting star that happened to be a literal one, came true and he entered their lives. And I love that. It's a really nice, comforting scene that we end with here. And I like that. To get to the kind of the bumper, the punctuation of it all, is that we have that really sweet scene with Martha about I hate to think what would happen if you weren't there for that family. We cut to Revelations, which is a little story about Doomsday. Which again, if this story is about vulnerability through the emotional stuff with Ma Kent, you also have vulnerability in the literal sense in that he got shot in the face, which meant his nose had to be reset with a ball-peen hammer. And Superman, Clark Kent was vulnerable in the story, and the ultimate vulnerability in Superman's life, famously, is Doomsday, the creature that killed Superman. So I love that we're foreshadowing that. It's like the perfect little.
But we're also foreshadowing it via the fact that Doomsday himself is vulnerable. He's just kind of powerlessly floating out in space.
Yeah, and again, that's the thing about it too. That's what the story's all about. Of like again, like you were lucky today, but in the future, I don't know what's going to happen. Like she still has that concern that again, the day could be his last. Is invulnerable at times as he can be, and of course, it's looming over his head. And in the literal sense, like Doomsday's just in space, like making his way to Earth over a course of decades. I'd imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Like the future loss that she's going to endure personally is Doomsday. So I mean that's so again a really good parallel there. I like how it's a real sparing use of Doomsday, and I'm sure Landis was really excited to use Doomsday after the whole Death and Return of Superman thing.
Right.
Okay, let's get to issue number 3, Parrot.
I'm Bruce Wayne. Of
course, reminds me of I'm Luke Cage.
Of course, yes.
So this was done by a really good art style. They had a really good artist on this one. I'm not familiar with his work, Jolie, or her work. I'm not entirely sure. Jolie Jones, if I'm saying that remotely correct. And this story, Parrot, is about the first girlfriend. That's essentially what this is kind of that period in Superman's life here. Where okay, so this is Clark Kent, but what if the first girlfriend wasn't Lana? What if it was someone else?
Dragon, I would actually probably say this is my favorite issue out of the seven.
That's fair. I mean, this is
Just
a real
because
good
I
one.
really, really like the premise. Like it's a very high concept, sort of like elevator pitch of what if Clark Kent just spent a day impersonating Bruce Wayne on his birthday?
Will tell you this. I think I like, honestly, out of all the issues, I'll say issue two wasn't, not that it was bad, it was just my least favorite. But when I was reading it through the first time, like, this issue was a big kind of pick me up from, like, I mean, yeah, that was a good one, but this one was like, yeah, this is a fun one. Like, this is probably the most fun of all the issues. I'll admit, this is the funnest.
I think it's the most fun, and I also feel like it's the most standalone in a good way. Where it's
True.
like I said, it's just kind of like a quick sort of like elevator pitch. Like, it's got a good love story to it, but a brief love story. It's kind of just like I don't know.
No, I say absolutely.
There's a lot of things going for it.
Yeah, and again, T, that's that great. It is a standalone story. By the same token, again, a lot of stuff pays off from this issue specifically, and like the next couple about who he meets in this whole pretend to be Bruce Wayne thing. So again, it's just really honestly, it feels the most John Hughesian out of it's a story that feels very John Hughes like. It feels very Breakfast Club. So so again, I one of my other favorite again. So ET was a favorite idea. Then this one comes along, the whole Clark Kent being mistaken for Bruce Wayne. Oh my God, yes, just I love it. And thematically, this idea, this whole Bruce Wayne thing, again, it's kind of the inciting incident of the issue. Clark essentially, of course, folks, the elevator pitch is that Clark Kent he wins a free he wins a free trip to the, I think it was the Bahamas, the God.
I don't remember. It was the Caribbean.
Yeah, yeah. But he gets he wins a free plane. Essentially, he wins a free trip, and he goes on this plane ride, and the plane goes down, and of course, when the plane goes down, he washes up. It is the Bahamas. Sorry, I'm looking at it right here. It's the Bahamas.
Okay.
So yeah, he's going to the Bahamas, and of course, the boat crashes, and he and the pilot they kind of wash up to next to this boat, in which it's Bruce Wayne's yacht, just by happenstance, and that in itself is a fantastic premise, and I love just again seeking kind of the thematicism with the title "Parrot" of all the winged things. Why call this issue "Parrot"? One, parrots are kind of colorful, and it's kind of a party bird in a way. Pirates, parrots, the whole nine yards. By the same token, though, here's what I like thematically about it, is that this issue is all about people repeat what they're told as if it were the truth, and that's kind of the parrot effect. Like you're saying the same thing over and over again. Like the repetition of a parrot, and therefore it's like, hey, that's Bruce Wayne, so it must be Bruce Wayne. People, as Barbara in the issue, the girl that Clark meets, who, by the way, I'm going to blow your mind about who that really is, but well, maybe not blow your mind, to surprise you with who that really is.
Well, I mean, I naturally assumed it was Jim Gordon's daughter.
No, it's not. It's not.
It's not? Okay. Okay. I mean, she was a redhead, so it's like, I don't know.
True, but it's kind of cooler than that, honestly. But
Okay. Okay.
so the point is, what was I getting at? Oh yeah, so again, what she says to him about holy Bruce. Again, another great idea. I love how Landis is really hard on Batman as a character at times. He really is. He basically he's easy to write. Like, oh,
Well, it's
Batman.
funny because Batman has like one moment and it starts out awesome, but then Superman just owns him.
That's the thing. I mean, this issue though. I mean, I love. Here's the thing. Like, he won't admit it, and that's the thing. He says he can write it easily, and again, I hate to admit it when he's right like this, but yeah, he's right. I mean, he got it down pat, and I mean, he did it so well, and I guess it's easy for him, but he did it so well here. The idea that Bruce Wayne, he basically floats around again while he's doing other things. He keeps Bruce Wayne alive by having these parties that he doesn't show up to. I mean, that's kind of a clever idea.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, again, that's the whole notion of the whole parrot evolve. Again, people say that Bruce Wayne was there, even though none of them see him there. But again, the idea is floated around, therefore the parrot effect. And so this girl, by the way, the American parallel here, I felt it like American hedonism. We have a really great scene here where we see kind of Superman's ethics start to form in Clark Kent, where Clark Kent's speaking as a Superman, where he's starting to see we basically have all these rich guys on this boat, and like they're literally eating this caviar, and this caviar and like stuff with gold flakes on it. That was like an actual thing that some really fancy restaurants like they have gold flakes on food. which is just a ridiculous. It's stupid.
Right?
Honestly,
Like literal gold, like 24 karat gold.
Essentially, yes. I kid you not.
Oh man.
This is
Oh,
an
I
actual.
don't even want to get into that right now.
It's an actual stupid thing that people. I mean, I think it's stupid. I guess the highfalutin crowd, they basically eating our wealth. It's like I really want to eat.
Right?
Do you, how ego driven do you have to be to eat metal? Essentially, eat a form of metal.
Oh God.
But
Oh man. Oh God.
I'll say
Okay. I
this.
never thought this. I never thought this podcast would turn into a conversation on the class tier system. But yeah, that is pretty ridiculous.
I mean, in all fairness, I don't know if this is still going on, but I know this was an actual thing. It's based on a real thing that is done. I don't know if maybe it's like a health thing. They don't
I
do
mean,
it.
just the idea of like eating gold, like can you imagine? Like, it sounds like it would taste horrible, Dragon. That's my whole thing outside of
But that's the thing. It's like flakes. Like it's like gold sprinkles on your food there, so you wouldn't taste the gold, but you'd like I ate. It's purely, that's the ridiculous thing. It's purely for your own benefit. Like, hey, I ate something expensive. Like it's no taste or anything. It's like this. Anyway,
Oh man, and I thought eating at Walt Disney World and like getting a reservation at Be Our Guest was kind of splurging, but no, that's nothing. Anyways, I digress.
but my point with bringing up the gold flakes there, so you definitely see the American hedonism at work. You're basically the upper class. You get kind of the class system in this issue.
But on a more positive side of things, you also kind of get the whole idea that the American dream of it all, that coming to America you can be anyone. It's kind of like a refresh button in a way.
Certainly, yes, and people believe like the first thing they hear, and that's the thing you tell them, which is a very again with the story of Clark Kent. That's honestly what the crux of this whole story is. Tiki of he met this girl, and this girl basically gave him the idea to go to Metropolis. That's the idea. He was going to stay in Smallville. He was just going on a trip, then coming back to Smallville. But meeting this girl really, basically gave him the idea to do more with his life, to kind of become a reporter and basically do more and become a veterinarian at Smallville. So essentially, so this girl specifically, and again, the kind of the fun animal parable. She mentions a cheetah, and folks, she's actually Cheetah. She's the Wonder Woman villain, Cheetah.
Oh wow. Okay.
And this again to be something to look out for too. Cheetah is a character with like there are many people who've taken on the Cheetah moniker over the decades, and this is a very this is like many people equate.
I know they cast her in Wonder Woman too, right?
Exactly, that's what I was getting at. So yes, this is the character Kirsten Wiggs playing Barbara, and basically this is the '80s version, hence the whole '80s setting of Wonder Woman. The '80s version of Cheetah, which was done by George Perez and Len Wein, the guy who created Wolverine, Len Wein. Barbara and Minivera. So she's this is the girl that he meets. So it's kind of like if you don't know it, it's a fine issue. But if you do know it, it's kind of like, oh my god, he's like one of Wonder Woman's arch enemies. Like he had a one night stand with. That's kind of trippy.
Nice.
And again, this is like in the New 52. So I don't know like how. I guess it would have been done by this point. I don't know if Max Landis was like doing this.
I was going to ask you about that, Dragon. So this is Elseworlds or.
No, here's the thing. This is Elseworlds, but I'm saying the New 52 like came before this, and I wish like it retroactive they could have just had this be the New 52. That's the thing about it. So New 52 is in 2011. This is in 2015.
That's the thing. I feel like this doesn't really shake up the Superman mythos enough to have it be like, it's not like a Benjamin Bratt Superman or a vampire Batman. You know what I mean? It's not like really radical ideas.
I know, but like this is like the big complaint of the New 52 is that just they didn't go far, like they didn't do anything, they didn't change things up enough, and they just like they were basically why do it if we're just going to hit the reset, if we're going to undo all this new stuff we're doing anyway, and essentially that was the ridiculous nature of the New 52, and this is like a version of okay. We're getting some fresh, like again, we're doing Superman from a different perspective than we usually do, and we're kind of adding these interesting adventures in his lifestyle. Mm-hmm. So again, that would have been kind of the approach that would I think would have differentiated things. But again, I don't want to get too on a New 52 tangent here. But the point is, I say this because in New 52, famously, Superman and Wonder Woman were an item. They dated. So imagine if you're dating Wonder Woman, then you learn like, oh my god, you had a one night stand with my arch enemy. I'm just saying that's kind of it's kind of funny anyway.
Oh man.
So before we get to the more of the cheetah stuff, I love on the whole. Speaking just this as it is here, I love that this builds up the DC universe here. This is kind of Clark Kent's foray into the greater DC universe. Because think about all the players that we put into play here. You know, we put into play Bruce Wayne, Oliver Queen, the Green Arrow, Deathstroke, and Cheetah. At least four big kind of big characters in the DC universe.
Yeah, again, the Deathstroke moment was great. I love how caught off guard Deathstroke was. He's just like, what the hell is going on? What are you?
Because he was hired by Falcone to kill Bruce Wayne, and again, it's like being given a name and a target. Again, he does look similar to Bruce Wayne, so you can understand. He was like, "What the?" And again, he tries stabbing.
Like the tables get turned on that situation so quickly.
A really cool idea too is that what they did here is like Superman gets drunk twice in this story, and not through conventional means. Because you imagine how the heck can Superman get drunk? It's like Captain America thing. How can he get drunk? And what we do here is he doesn't get. It's not alcohol that's getting him drunk. It's like other methods that are getting him into a drunken state. So we have in this case, the idea is Deathstroke poisoned his drink with neurotoxin to make him helpless. And the neurotoxin is making him drunk, not the alcohol, which is kind of clever. It's like, yeah, that's how you get a drunk Clark.
It's just like, you should be dead. You should be 6 feet under by now, buddy.
And again, this is what I'm talking about. This is like the refreshing stuff. Superman, you've never, in like almost 80 years, you've never seen Superman drunk until like something like this.
And again, just to go back to the image we have up here, I just love the idea that he's just drunkenly going around in the party, like, after embracing it, like, yeah, I'm Bruce Wayne.
Yeah. So again, other things too. We have these great time markers for the rest of our story here. This whole thing puts a lot of things into play. Like Oliver Queen. This is the Oliver Queen that he meets here, which I think coincidentally, he looks like the Stephen Amell version from the TV show, by the way, because he looks in this issue he looks a lot like Stephen Amell. That's just my 2 cents on it. The Green Arrow from the TV show. So this is Oliver Queen before the Green Arrow origin. That's the idea here. This is like when Oliver Queen was a legitimate party boy. Like he wasn't hiding. It's like that's the difference between him and Bruce Wayne. That Bruce Wayne pretended to be a party boy, where Oliver Queen actually was the party boy who turned it around. So like he's like him like partying on the yacht saying, "Hey, Bruce Wayne." He's the one who called
Superman is kind of like Clark Kent is sort of like the goody two shoes who wants to be the party boy in this issue.
He gets to live it up for a change. So, I mean, other stuff, too, like we see Batman training. We have this great little cameo at the very end where basically Bruce Wayne is made aware of this whole someone took his name on. He had, like, cameras on the yacht. Ra's al Ghul has a little cameo in the story, too, saying, son of bats, look this way. You should look into this. And he sees, like, I'm Bruce Wayne! And again, this all pays off because, again, he remembers this years later. So I guess a point I kind of trailed off with before we get to we ran off the whole girl of it all here, with the cheetah of it all. I love that in that scene, so he has this hot tub scene with Oliver Queen here, where he's with the ridiculous gold sprinkled food. He basically says, I had a friend in Smallville. Basically I had a friend in town who needed surgery. We all pulled our resources together to get her that surgery, and you guys are wasting this on food. So again, that's kind of I think that's Clark discovering his Superman ethics unbeknownst to himself. Like that's a Superman line of thought right there. Like that's a kid with good morals who grew up in Kansas coming out there through a natural way that again seeds where this is the kind of thinking that a superhero is going to have years later, which is really really nice.
Sure.
So the fact that Clark Kent has this big epiphany about his life, this thing that sets him on the hero's path, essentially. Again, it's not a green crystal moment, but this is the thing that gets him to Metropolis instead of he finds green crystal. Years go by, Superman City. It doesn't necessarily go like that, but Clark has this big epiphany about his life via this future supervillainess, which is just kind of like, oh, that's clever. Yeah.
All right.
So I guess last thing, what did you think about the Mixie story, the Mixie Spitalick story?
Oh, I actually really like that. I'm glad you brought that up. That was actually kind of, if I'm not mistaken, Dragon, I believe that's the first time I've encountered that character in the comic book format, and I really like how he played around with the comic tropes, you know, kind of like the bleeding lettering and the vanishing, you know, how he's kind of vanishing throughout the pages. Really clever stuff there. Liked it a lot.
Yeah. I mean, it's called a story called The Real Question, and it's kind of the most heady Grant Morrison-esque that Landis gets in the story here, because it's like this is the kind of thing like Grant Morrison would do, like Animal Man back in the day. And there's this character called Animal Man who basically broke. It was like famously, this is a character in a serious comic, not like a Deadpool sort of thing, in a very serious comic who like he addressed. It was like a scary moment in comics history, Tiki, where a character addressed the audience like, "I can see you." And it was like Grant Morrison and scary. And it was like, oh my god. So we kind of have a trippy moment akin to that here, where it's this trippy explanation of why comic characters endure. It really struck me. I completely forgot about this rereading it. Like, oh my god, I forgot that I got this kind of metaphysical and clever of how. Yes, I mean, if you think about these characters, they'll never die, and that's why these characters go on for 80 plus, 75 to 80 plus years. It's because of again, like, hey, I don't think about you at all, but the minute when you think about me, even like a minute, an hour, or something, that's when I'll come back. It's really clever take on each issue. We have a villain in focus with each of these. Well, sorry, let me redact that. Sorry, so you go to the first issue. No, a lot of the issues involve villains. At least 3 of them have iconic Superman villains who are not in the story. You know, we have like Doomsday and we have Mixie Spitalik. So I like how we're kind of giving those guys due in building to other Superman villains like Parasite later on. So, okay, let's talk about issue number 4.
All right.
Titled Owl. No, folks, not the Court of Owls. Different owl. Owl.
Or not, oh god, not Night Owl from Watchmen either.
Oh, not that Night Owl either. It's the art. Okay, this is done by Jay Lee, who, by the way, did like a New 52 Batman Superman comic too. So this is like this is kind of a fun get that they got here. Like, hey, we got the guy who did that. Now we got him doing this. So Jay Lee, who is a very I don't know if expressionistic is probably not the right word, but he has this really signature art style you kind of see here. It's like kind of this almost painted style. It's like I don't know. It feels really. What do you think of the art style in this, Stevie?
You know, it's interesting. I feel like it's good, but it's also maybe the most out of place of the art styles that we get. It kind of feels like the one that's sort of, as you say, Dragon. It's very realistic in a way.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, you know, Jay Lee's not one of my favorite artists, but I do kind of respect his work. I think he's more of a cover guy than anything. That's the thing. I think he does really good cover work. Like one of the covers for this one was like, basically it's kind of the image you see before you here, where you had like Batman being thrown up against the wall with like half of his mask torn off, and that was kind of the image of that was like that was his cover for the book. They have like a couple covers of different artists, and that was the one that he did. So the theme of this story is the first job. You know, it's kind of like it's kind of working in America in a way. It's kind of Clark Kent getting his first job.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, this is a story of progress, and this is sort of if we've had in the previous issues, it was Clark figuring out his powers, and this issue was Clark kind of figuring out kind of what he was going to do, and this is sort of Clark figuring himself out. You know, not figuring out kind of the super. Basically, Clark has to figure out himself to figure out Superman. I felt that's what this one was about. It's kind of the building blocks of creating a symbol. Like the end of this issue is kind of the building blocks of him creating a symbol and figuring out Superman of it all.
Sure.
And I love how each we definitely get the American parallel for this one is it's definitely the elitist class. It's like we have the American business class. This is very much kind of like we have this trio, this big business summit of like 3 very successful, very young businessmen in Lex Luthor, Oliver Queen, and Bruce Wayne. All 3 of them are meeting, and I love that each of these 3 businessmen creates the idea of Superman. I really love that. So Clark is a character that we're following here, and he's being a kind of a proactive reporter that kind of has extremely good luck on his first day on the job here. He's got the tenacity about him.
Yeah, and I don't know, Dragon. At this point, I feel like I feel like the first three issues were kind of like the big highlights for me, and the rest of the issues, while not necessarily bad, and maybe it's just the way I read them, and I was just kind of like going through them all in a blur. But it's definitely it's good stuff. It's just I feel like the first three issues combined really make something. Well, whereas this is like I said, it's good. It's just I don't know. I just kind of want to warn you that going forward, just because I kind of marathon this book all in one sitting. Everything else is kind of just a blur to me. So kind of hopefully get through this.
All right. Okay, well, let me say this. So,
All right.
my point is, I like how each of our businessmen that are kind of like the big, like, oh my god, these three business guys, they're having this, they're having this summit. I like how I think this might be one of the most intelligent issues out of the series. I really think this one might be the smartest one, where it's we each have a payoff that again like that ushers him towards the revelation of Superman, because the next issue we get Superman. So we have Oliver Queen. We pay off that idea of like, hey, Bruce Wayne. Again, you're like, hey, I remember this guy from the party. I called where my back in my dumb Playboy days. I mistakenly called him Bruce Wayne. So he goes, hey, why don't you come to the helicopter with me? And
Mm-hmm.
Lois is like, he meets Lois for the first time. Lois is like, what? What's this? Why is this guy so special? Like he thought he misread Lois's name, so he thought it was like Lewis Lane. It was all it's got some funny stuff going on. I really liked Lannis's take on Lois Lane. I really did. By the way, it was kind of like
It's
a
very subtle. It's like, we don't need Lois to be like way out in front, kind of like, again, maybe one of the flaws that not necessarily Man of Steel, but more so Batman versus Superman committed, where Lois Lane is just sort of like she's poking her head where she doesn't belong, and she's kind of too much of a go getter. This one is just kind of like, we see her, we know, like, we don't spend too much time establishing her, but at the same time, it's a very endearing version of a classic character.
yeah. And mainly just to walk through kind of our kind of our three kind of businessmen here. So Queen, what he does again, this is post the origin. So he's been on the island, he's learned himself, and again he's correcting himself from his Playboy days, where he basically went through a very sobering experience, and he tells Clark this story about how he's trying to turn his life around. And he looked at himself in a reflection when he was on the island that he was stranded on, and he basically kind of like, so he didn't like what he saw looking at him, and he wanted to change himself. And again, it's the whole like looking at yourself and kind of basically making something of yourself. That's a big kind of like genesis point for Clark into getting Superman. And the Batman of it all, again, Bruce Wayne, he definitely has a big impact on him in the well, we'll get to Bruce at the very end here, but let's talk about Luthor though. So again, I love how Max Landis writes Lex Luthor. I really do. I
You know
love
what it
it.
reminds me of?
What does it remind you of?
It reminds me of Sandman, oddly enough.
Really?
Well, this and one other conversation towards the end of the run is going to remind me of Sandman even more so, but just the philosophical nature of it, you know what I mean? Just kind of like the way that Luther just kind of goes on these long monologues, but just he means what he says. He says it with such conviction. It's I would say this is very much the most dialogue driven of the seven issues, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's but because it's so dialogue driven, that's kind of what gives it sort of a Neil Gaiman quality to me.
Sure, sure. And so I like the Lex kind of. I just love how it's sort of like Lex creating what he dreads in a way. He kind of again he really builds the foundation of Superman here, because basically he came up with the whole symbol of hope idea. That's kind of what Lex did here, unbeknownst to himself. I just love how he accidentally created Superman here by going on this long diatribe here, where he has this whole. Basically, he comes up with the idea of using the S as a symbol here. That's what he basically. Everyone goes around as if they have a big S on their chests, as if it stands for special. And don't get me wrong; they established that the S is still like the house of the house of L. It's still a house of L and a symbol for his parents and everything. But at the same time, it's a fun coincidence that basically gives Superman the idea of like, hey, I should use this symbol as basically a. Basically, I should use this. I should take what he's saying here, and I should use it as kind of a. I should say something with my lineage, essentially.
Mhm.
So Um, let's see. So basically, we see that Lex has a genuine desire to make an impact. Where he's like he wants to be a guy who stands above the rest for a reason, not just like he doesn't need people to like him. Like, and he has this. And here's the thing that like kills me with how Landis writes a really great Lex Luthor here, where Luthor's so merciless yet so hyper intelligent in this scene, where he lists off like, think about this, Kent. In years, like a few years, Oliver Queen, he'll dry up all of his parents' money, and Bruce Wayne's going to be, he'll die of a drug overdose in a seedy motel, and then I'm going to be around. Basically, it's a Luthor that views himself as the man of tomorrow. He's the guy who's going to be running the world. Again, he's a guy who almost like a Doctor Doom type. He wants to save the world genuinely, in a way that's on his own terms.
Mm.
So again, you see a lot of the American business class through Lex, especially again the mirthlessness, but by the same token, it does keep the gears spinning. And I love the ending where he gave Clark Kent he kind of started Clark Kent's career with giving him this really epic quote, and then he insults him by dropping him. I believe this is your floor. He drops him off at the kid zone.
And I just love the idea that LexCorp has a kid zone to begin with.
And again, I love story-wise. It is an insult to Clark, but by the same token, introduces him to Dick Grayson. And Grayson, again, along with Bruce, is reflective of, again, it indoctrinates another big element of the Superman mythos in Clark here, where he basically talks about how Batman, if Batman does exist, he's a package deal. Like he can't just be all fear. He wants to be Batman's sidekick, and he wants to be the hope expressed through Batman. Basically, this idea of hope is communicated to Superman of like, hey, you should be basically Lex gives him the symbol, like Queen gives him
basically like a less hokey version of like, oh, the S stands for hope.
Yeah, I mean, I love how it's in installments. I love how each character isn't wasted. Like, Queen's like, you should take a direction in your life. Lex is like, you should make a symbol, make something that counts, and Dick Grayson is about like, you should celebrate the light. It should be about hope, and it should be hope trumping scare tactics. That's what it should be. And of course, the costume affair of it all comes from the big Batman moment at the end,
mm-hmm.
where a Batman unintentionally. I just love the idea that Batman exists before Superman. He unintentionally creates Superman with kind of the model of a vigilante.
Yes.
So I love that idea.
The earliest Superman is actually wearing one of Batman's capes. That just tickled me.
That's what I'm saying. So that gets us. Let's see. So overall, we get a lot accomplished here, and our little bumper punctuation story is kind of more of a facilitator here. It's kind of a fun like from.
Really quick. I love Clark Kent being a badass in this moment where he's just like, so what should the headline be? The Batman is real, or that Bruce Wayne is Batman?
Yeah, that is great, man. I do love don't look. I'm a huge Batman fan. I don't like Batman being kind of like this. But by the same token, it's so well done. It's like so. He just like rips the cowl in half and then discovering this, and just Batman has that moment. What are you? Because again, you see. Like he tries to electrify him to get free. He tries to smoke bomb him. He tries everything. This guy's not budging. Like, what is this guy? Again, this is like an early Batman too. So again, they're both kind of early in their careers. I mean, overall, the best. We'll get to in the next issue when we build to it. But anyway, the punctuation of this issue is this little story called Vampire. Now, the story called Vampire. It's done by Steve Dillon, who unfortunately is no longer with us. He's the co-creator of Preacher, the comic that, of course, is now a very popular TV series.
Mm-hmm.
The artist on that. And this is about Parasite, who, again, I take it this is the great kind of like not thematicism, I should say. It's the great kind of glue between our issues here, because Parasite is the bad guy in the next issue. And we see the origin of Parasite before us here. We see like in dialogueless panels of like, he gets an injection, then we see him like as a heroin addict. And of course, then he's just getting money for more heroin, which is a test from LexCorp that turns him to Parasite.
It's like Requiem for a Dream in a page of comic panels.
Essentially, yes. And I love that this one, it's kind of a connection to our villain of the next issue and a connection to Lex Luthor. Because again, Luthor was big in this issue. And then, of course, thematically, we had Batman. Now we have like Vampire, Batman, Vampire, get it? So there's kind of a bit of that going on there.
Someone call Michael C. Hall.
You know, he is open to playing Batman, so never say never. Okay. All right, so let's get to my favorite issue, issue 5. So I
Yeah,
love.
you know what, Dragon? I got to admit, issue 3 is a lot of fun. It's probably the best standalone issue, but issue 5 is damn good. Like this is probably solidly the best. Like this is to me, this is the most Elseworldy in a good way of the issues, and it very much kind of sets the standard for the rest of the story to come.
So this is absolutely what I wanted from kind of a retelling of Superman here. This issue is like hits all my, it kind of hits everything I wanted. The ET thing kind of hemmed the cape of what I wanted to see, and this is the full blown like, oh my god, yes, this is brilliant. Where, so by the way, we have a really good artist on this. This is Francis Manapul does the art on this, and Francis Manapul did run on Batman. That was really good. This is just a really great artist, by the way. So I love the work of Francis Manapul. And sometimes I wish the storytelling reflected the art. I mean, in this case, I think we have a great balance of, but sometimes there were stories that looked better than they were. You know.
Mm-hmm.
So the theme of this story is growing up. So this is again, this is really kind of Clark gets a firsthand Superman, I should say, gets a firsthand education of like kind of okay, so you've become a symbol, and now you got to like like what does that symbol stand for? Like, what are you going to do with that? And it's kind of him kind of coming to grips with. It's like, he's like a kid playing dress up who gets educated firsthand by Lex Luthor. So it's him kind of growing up in a big sense there. So this is my favorite story. It's has great art. It's the thing that I love about it most is that it's a really cool, almost year one Superman. I love it. It feels very. It's like a Superman year one. I know we're actually getting a Superman year one by Frank Miller, but honestly, this is my barometer for that. If we can do something close to that,
Yeah, this is a really good barometer for that. And frankly, I don't have any faith in Frank Miller that he's going to top this.
I know, but imagine if he did, though. I mean, how cool would it be?
But I just love the idea that Superman is like a vaguely established thing, but it's not like a big American legend or anything. It's just kind of like, hey, there goes that weird guy in one of Batman's capes. It's like he's almost kind of like you know I don't know. I don't have. He's almost kind of like a weird sort of like Hancock type superhero, like
I'm
a very
so
street level but very powered superhero.
I definitely got that vibe, but more so, I get the Hancock vibe really with issue 7. But I mean, yeah, we're starting to build that though. So I absolutely see your. I'm saying that issue 7 feels like absolutely like a Hancock direction. Which again, Hancock folks was a mixed bag story wise, but it was really good in concept though. By the way, you know Vince Gilligan worked on Hancock.
No, I did not.
He didn't. Unfortunately, he didn't write it or direct it. But I mean, I think honestly, I think if that happened, I think it would have been a lot better.
Well, yeah.
I kind of feel like an undercurrent of Gilligan, though. Like I think he was like a producer on, but you can feel like an undercurrent. Anyway, so I'm getting off track with Hancock. The point is, so yes, I mean, I love everything about this take on like an early Superman because yeah, it makes sense. Like all these again, kind of Landis stamps of like a logical logic here. Where okay, if you were Superman, like wouldn't you try out a mask before you go unmasked? And he's wearing an aviator. I love this. I love the design of this Superman where he's wearing all black to match the cape. He's got these aviator goggles on for two reasons. One is a mask, and secondly, to keep the bugs from going into his eyes when he's flying at high speeds.
Dragon, did you know that the roller coasters at Cedar Point are infamous for getting bugs in your face?
I wouldn't be surprised by that.
Just a little fun fact there. It's kind of like all part of the experience. Anyways.
I mean, again, I love all these little touches. Like, he wears a bulletproof vest to kind of throw off suspicion of, like, okay, maybe he's, like, it keeps people guessing. Like, they're going to aim for the bulletproof vest. Like, they aim away from the face so he doesn't, like, repeat the whole ball-peen hammer thing from issue 2.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, like, he's throwing off the scent. Again, like, people are questioning, like, is this guy human? Is he not human? Like, is he flying, like, through, like, a jetpack or something? It keeps them guessing. I love all these little touches. And it's a good design, too. It's just a great little design. Again, it's a year one Superman. And
I'd like to own a nice action figure of this design of Superman.
Me too. I mean, I love this design. It's a shame that we don't. Bear in mind, I still like the direction we go when we keep getting closer and closer to the iconic Superman. But I wish we had more of the Superman. Honestly, I'd love to see. Again, this feels like sort of the Benjamin Bratt Superman almost. Like it's kind of a fresh design take on Superman as well. You know, where you had Superman with like this long duster on, and that now we have kind of an all black Superman. It's kind of, so. I love that he's just visually he's riding Batman's coattails a little, and I love it. You know, again, it's that whole if you're in a world where Batman existed
Well, I
before
mean, he's literally riding Batman's coattails.
exactly. And by the way, again, I won't throw too much shade at it here, but again, we had a similar notion with the whole not just Man of Steel, but the whole DCEU, where okay, Batman existed before Superman, and we didn't do nearly enough with that, and here we're doing a lot more with it with only an issue.
Mhm.
Well, two issues to be fair, two issues. So let's see. So Lois is really good in this. I love this. Is my favorite issue, not just from the design standpoint, it's the logic of it. I do love the dialogue is so good in this issue. I love the dialogue between Lois and then later on with Lex. So by the way, Lois Lane, Landis play with ethnicities in the story, like we do. We do some Lois Lane is Asian in the story. Did you know that?
No, I didn't. I didn't even catch on to that.
Yeah, it's kind of like a little cool retro. Again, like these little small tweaks that are kind of like, yeah, it's kind of different. I kind of like that.
And of course, we'll get a black Jimmy Olsen, which was kind of cool.
Yeah, we get a black and gay Jimmy Olsen, which was really again it's different. Like we have a black Jimmy Olsen on Supergirl, and again they've kind of worked with that, and they've done some cool stuff with that.
Right,
And
right.
again, it's again fun, refreshing stuff with Superman. That again, we'll get the like kind of the good stuff with Jimmy Olsen in the next issue. Trust me, folks. That's when we get to talk about Jimmy Olsen bigger there. So anyway, so Clark and Lois they have this great conversation about this about the earnest ideal. Essentially, it's this great thing. I just love how it distills to this one line, and this is where Landis really makes Lois come to life for me here, where she says, "Clark, I love the idea that you were peddling here, of just like this." You know, just what if he just is a guy who wants to help? Like, what if one person doesn't suck? I just love that line. Like, I just want to believe there's one person who doesn't suck in the world. You know?
Mm-hmm.
So again, and that kind of sells him like to do with Superman. Just like again, folks, is like what Man of Steel probably should have strived for a lot more here. With like just this in cynical times, basically Superman is going to be that one uncynical guy in the uncynical times, and that's kind of the idea that Clark is basically taking his own morality and kind of making it into a symbol of his own morality. And the best scene in this whole thing might. Oh, I'm sorry. We should talk about the action. What do you think about all the Parasite stuff? What do you think about Parasite and the fight and everything?
I mean, I think just generally speaking, the Landis frames action very well. It's very quick paced. It's very exciting. I like that kind of stuff. Of course, with this being a Clark Kent centric story, we don't get a ton of action, but I like that the stuff that we do get very much moves the story along at a at a good clip.
Yeah, man, I like that he's working with the SWAT team and everything. It looks very kind of SWAT team accommodating. So visually, we're kind of complementing the style with what's going on in the story. So that's all nice. I like that Parasite in himself is kind of a symbol of power. He's a guy who absorbs power and sucks people dry of their power. Therefore, what we have with the Lex story, again, a guy who's very powerful in his own right. Basically, I love that power is yet another theme of this story. And I'll get to the American Ideal when we get to Lex here. So let's just get to Lex then. So the best scene for me is the conversation between Superman and Lex Luthor. It's reminiscent of one of my favorite things in the animated series. I love Lex and Superman's dynamic in the animated series. The Clancy Brown Lex Luthor in the first episode of the animated series like distilled this for me, where you had this scene where Lex Luthor, the first time Superman shows up in Metropolis and he foils one of Luthor's schemes, he's hovering ominously outside of Luthor's like penthouse window, like of Lex, and Luthor invites him in, and of course Superman doesn't. He doesn't say a thing during the scene, and Luthor's monologuing, and he basically monologues over like, well, there's nothing you can prove about what just happened, and listen, Superman. He's just like writing them off, like I built half of Metropolis, and like 2/4 of its people work for me, whether they know it or not. It's like, oh my god, it's such a great scene. So I got all my fun nostalgia for what I love about Lex Luthor. It's so like I love this Lex even more than I like the previous issues Lex, and that was great. But this sets up a super smart Lex Luthor who will throw in all the legalities in Superman's face, and he outthinks him. Like this is the Lex Luthor I would have desperately loved to see in Batman v Superman. Like this is the Lex I wanted to see, Tiki.
And the sad thing is, I think Jesse Eisenberg has the capabilities to pull off this Lex Luthor.
And again, this is the Lex Luthor that kind of Max Landis for years he kind of sold us on, of like Lex who's like smart as a supercomputer, where he's you're basically Superman. He here's the thing. So he stops Parasite, and Parasite mentions LexCorp or like Luthor or something, and he throws him. Again, he's trying to act like the Flesher, if not the Flesher Superman, then like the 1939 Superman who's like gonna beat up wife abusers, like wife beaters and such. And like he's a guy who's like a hands-on solution type Superman. Again, this early in his career, he would be. So he throws Parasite in Luthor's office, like crash, breaks a window, and he says, and Luthor says, "Oh, so you're here to kill me?" Like Luthor, right off the top, he just puts it all in front of you. Okay, so you're here to kill me, is that right? And he says, "What?" And he just catches him off guard because obviously he's not going to kill him. And he just says, "Well, if you're not going to kill me, what are you here to do? Like, do you want to work together? Like, what exactly?" And he just outsmarts Superman like 8 ways to Sunday here and saying, well, okay, you have a few ways you can strike this here. Like, you came here to try to kill me with this guy. You broke my window, and I can sue you for the window, by the way. You're trespassing.
Right.
The thing that got me so much on the reread, every time I reread this, it's that Luthor, he says, okay, here's what's going to happen, all right? You're going to leave him with me. You just threw him in my lap. I'm going to take that as basically Luthor got an idea in the moment here of, okay, you delivered my little science project to me here, and that's how the official story is going to go. You brought him to me because I'm the only person who can contain this guy, who can contain a parasite, who can my facilities, my technology. I'm going to build technology to house this guy in like a specialized prison cell. The government's going to pay me like thousands to millions of dollars for, because and basically I'm getting an official endorsement from you to do this, and there's nothing you can do about it, which is just so trippy and mind blowing that Luthor is that smart. He just in the moment he came up with that idea.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that to me is spot on. And this again, we have the counterbalance between Luthor and Lois here, where this is where the American parallel comes in here. I think this to me is the strongest version of what we're saying about the American dream here. This one specifically is about the American ideal, where Superman embodies the American ideal versus what we have on Lex's side of things here of this is big business corporate America that will outsmart you and try to screw you over every which way it can, like in a business sense. And
kind of like the guys creating the false sense of security that comes with the American ideal. You know what I mean? Kind of like the shadowy figures behind the American ideal in a way.
Exactly. And like Luthor just said, like he's profiteering off of like kind of like the fact that we have super criminals. He'll be profiting off of that. So it's like Superman got a first-hand education in like a big business of what he's going to be going up against. Like kind of it's not like he can deal with the superpowered threats, but he can't defeat the system.
Mm-hmm.
But what he learns is that actions count. That's what he learns from Lois. He learns that he should stick with the American ideal. Like he shouldn't change. He should be, hence the title Tiki. And this is where this issue to me is perfect in every way. Where you have the issue's title, Eagle. Eagle is a symbol, the American bald eagle, again, hence the Americana of it all here. It's the American eagle. It's a powerful symbol. It's soaring. It's simple, and it's beloved. Which is, of course, what man will become. Which is what Clark kind of comes in the focus at the end of this issue. And speaking of kind of the American ideal, and again, standing up to kind of a system in place, the beat that we hit at the end of this is the new Jimmy story. What do you think of the new Jimmy story?
I'm sorry. It all kind of is a blur to me. You're going to have to remind me exactly what the...
Jimmy Olsen sent a letter, like an email, I think, to Perry White about running the Two-Face story.
I remember something about Jimmy at the end, Dragon, but again, I kind of marathon this all in one chunk in like 2 hours, so I don't have much thoughts on
just my point.
I'm terribly sorry. I'm trying to keep up with this.
Okay, simple. My point is... Landis did some kind of clever world building with Two-Face, the idea that Harvey Dent was a martyr who was scarred with acid, and secretly he is the Two-Face killer. And publicly, it's like they're not acknowledging that it's Harvey Dent. The idea is Jimmy Olsen, who's a photographer, but also he's an aspiring, journalist. He's like Perry White probably shot him down over the story of like, no, we can't do it because there's a lot of red tape. Like we can't, we can't publish an article that defames the DA of Gotham City. We can't do that
unless he's on a TV show and he never gets any airtime. In which case, it's fine.
Exactly. Kind of a sweet story where basically again, one page, folks. A really impressive storytelling with one page here. Basically, it's an email. You can read the letter where it's he's saying, Perry, listen, you can if you're the newsman that I was sold on when I first worked here, you'll publish this story because it's the right thing to do. If not, then I quit. And you see again, it's a sweet little notion that you see the mouse pad going from going to it hits send or hits accept, isn't like he's going to publish the stories. And oh man, again, it's the American spirit shining through. It's the American ideal trumping the kind of big business corporate America kind of the system in place of like, no, we can't take unnecessary risk. We can't go against big business. We can't go against like the government or things like that. The kind of the American firewall, if you will. We can't go up against that. And it's like Perry White being like kind of a true blue newsman says, this kid with all of his heart and soul, he believes in the story. I'm going to back him up, which is really nice. Again, I think complements the story that we had before that. So all of that was just really, really swell.
All right, Dragon. So the 4th of July is happening in full force outside my window right now, and it's getting pretty loud. So I'm going to switch the thumbnail over, but why don't you kind of take the lead on issue 6? Sorry about that.
All right, folks. We're getting to issue number 6, which is Angel. Issue number 6 is Angel and is illustrated by Jonathan Case. Now, Jonathan Case, he is the 60s Batman comic artist, at least one of the best ones. So we have kind of the, he does the 60s Batman comic, which, of course, transcendentally gets us the Return of the Caped Crusaders animated movie and Batman Two-Face. So Jonathan Case, really good artist. And again, I think second to the issue we just had before. So this is probably my second favorite of the art styles here. And the theme of this story is friends. No, we're not talking Monica Chandler and Ross, Rachel, and Phoebe and Joey on this one. We're talking, we're just talking friendship.
Joey did dress up as Superman that one time.
Yeah, you're right, he did. Yeah. So this again, there's a fun Donner parallel to this one because I'm thinking of the Richard Donner film. You had this great bit where, after his first night out of saving people, it's that famous Superman getting cats out of trees. He saves like the falling plane, like the guy like bad vibrations, like all that stuff. He's foiling criminals and all such. It's a great little sequence. At the end of it, Superman is in the Fortress of Solitude talking to Jor-El, and Jor-El says, "No, it's okay to feel a little pride because the idea is Superman's feeling prideful, and this whole issue to me feels like a takeoff of that." And again, I could just be reading into it here, but I like that. I wouldn't underestimate Landis on this. I mean, it might be able to be about the because what we have is Clark dealing with the sin of pride. He's feeling good about being Superman, like the symbol that he was starting at the end of last issue. Some time's gone by, and now there's graffiti artists doing paintings of Superman on the wall. There's like a giant, like, "Welcome to Metropolis, it's Superman." Like, so Superman's kind of becoming a big symbol. He's starting to become like a known entity. We're getting like it's Superman in the red, blue, and like kind of the true red, white, and blue Superman that we're getting now. The American ideal personified onto this kind of this force that's saving people. And Clark's loving it. He's laughing it up, and it's kind of a relatable story of your kind of your small town friends coming to the big city and seeing how you
yeah. And Dragon, I'm glad you mentioned that because this is to me the big crux of issue 6 was kind of, like you said, sort of those big picture American ideals clashing with the universal experience of friends drifting away from each other and, small town lifestyle versus big city lifestyle and how people change over time. And I really thought Landis held a mirror up to those themes in a really interesting way this time around here.
Yes, I mean, I love we have a few American parallels here, and I think, of course, one, we have kind of American complacency in that it's dangerous when we kind of bask in the sin of pride, and it's dangerous when we get too complacent. And I'm saying, given what happens in the next issue, I think that's intentional. I think that we have kind of an issue about Superman's getting a little cocky. We gotta set him back a little bit in the next issue. I think that's it. Basically, again, if you look at it as a standalone, you just have Superman. He's kind of showing off for his friends a little, so you still have that. By the same token, then there is definitely a big payoff. And I think the other side of that we've been kind of talking about here is I think there was a "you can't go home again" element to the American, that kind of the Americana of it all here, where it's it's sort of the best example I have is like it's your friends moved from Kansas, or let's just say the universal example would be like you move from New York to LA, and it's like it's a very different sobering experience. Like it's a very different lifestyle. It's like there's an old joke in New York of like if you go from New York to LA, it's like LA will have you. Like
right.
There's a really funny gag in Seinfeld about like
unless you're Harley Quinn and the Joker.
Exactly, but that's the thing. Like
Harley Quinn and the Joker will have LA.
I think that's kind of what they had there. It's like a small town, or like kind of instead of New York, it's like Kansas. You're going from Kansas, like a real kind of humble small town, to kind of your big kind of like next gen city, as in kind of a pseudo LA in Metropolis.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I imagine that's kind of Landis's relatable experience of just kind of going, a Hollywood lifestyle versus like where you probably would come from and more humble roots. So it's basically, is that person gone forever when you like, is your friend that you knew growing up going to be gone forever? It's kind of friends kind of grounding you to your roots. And of course, Superman without his roots in Kansas ceases to be Superman. He just ceases to be, he's just a Superman in the sense of the most powerful man would have to be a Superman, not a super guy. Like we like a super guy, not necessarily a Superman. I know that sounds strange, but just go with me on that.
No, I hear what you're saying. God.
Oh, by the way, this the panel that we had before us, folks. The screen is locked, right?
Yeah, it's locked.
I just want to make sure because I want folks to see this here. This is my one of my favorite lines in the entire piece is this panel here. This whole, again, one of the great lines in dialogue here of Kenny here. Kenny, who's in the comics, he becomes a supervillain called Conduit. So I don't know if there's like some intentional. So like Max Landis absolutely knows that this guy turns into Conduit, which is why he used Kenny. Or I don't know if he's saying, hey, maybe this guy becomes a villain because he doesn't have faith in Clark. Who knows? But the point is, Kenny here, he's asking, well, what happens when you take your glasses off? Can you ever take them off? And I think it's the question we've been asking for years, and Landis has an answer for us. Like, yeah, he kind of gives an answer to the whole, like, how has no one figured out that Clark Kent is Superman? And Kenny and Clark's answer is, oh, I take them off all the time. People say to me, you look just like Superman.
It's almost kind of like the Bill Murray effect, the whole like no one will ever believe you. You know what I mean?
And
you don't believe what you're looking right at.
Tiki, it's the answer that's been under our nose for years, and you never, 80 years. Like again, I know this came out in 2015, but just again, essentially for decades, you never think of an answer like that, and boom, it's right there. And I love this panel too. It's just like believe the hype. It's like again, it's showing the ego in play here. Where again, it's like a cocksure Superman here, but like you look just like Superman. Almost, it's like a cocky version of the George Reeves fourth wall breaks, where it's like, oh Lois, I'm sure Superman knows. Wink. It's kind of like a modern version of that. I say it's kind of came up with that in the moment. They're like, yeah, that's even better.
Sure.
Now let's talk about Jimmy Olsen. So we meet Jimmy Olsen in this issue instead of just like hinting at him at the end of the previous issue. We have Jimmy Olsen's art gallery.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Dragon. Like I said, I don't have a ton to say about Jimmy Olsen outside of the fact that I like that they have these subtle differences to all the characters.
So the rant about Batman v Superman for a mere moment. Well, let's just one move more kind of Snyder's take on Jimmy Olsen.
Snyder's take on Jimmy Olsen is he's dead.
Yep. And because at first it was supposed to be Jenny Olsen, then it's like there's so much backlash.
Oh man! I totally forgot about Jenny Olsen. Oh god.
That's the thing. There was Jenny Olsen, and then we actually Olsen are going to kill him off within 5 minutes.
Oh man.
So essentially, what I like here is, folks, this is what they should have done with Jimmy Olsen, like something like this in the movies, or in general. This is what I'm talking about. There's a line where, when you change. There's a difference where you just kind of you change a character versus when you kind of you change the I'm trying to word it correctly here. Like this character is still fundamentally Jimmy Olsen. I think that's important. Where like Jenny Olsen it was a gender swap, but that's not necessarily the problem. The problem is we turned into like we turned her into Perry White's assistant, and we were just kind of like, is it Jimmy Olsen? Is it not Jimmy Olsen? Like, is it just basically it's an insult to that character? where if that character's not going to be around, what's the point? If we're just going to make Jimmy Olsen like a damsel in distress that has nothing to do with Clark Kent, why have her in there in the first place? And again, the gender swap is just kind of like, there's sort of like a line of like certain characters you don't change that fundamentally. And in the case of Jimmy Olsen here, this Jimmy Olsen is radically different. He's black, he's gay. He may or may not be working for the Daily Planet. The next issue suggests that he still is. The point is, like, this is a Jimmy Olsen who has, again, fundamentally, he's still in the spirit of that character. He's friends with Clark. He's a confidant of Clark Kent's. And he's very earnest. He has this really great kind of likability to him, where he's basically he did this art gallery where Lois pointed out to him, again, he's friends with Lois too, and Lois is saying he basically words the Clark, like, yeah, Lois isn't showing up because she thought I was glorifying the bad guys, and Jimmy Olsen, being the affable kind of like lovable guy that he is, says, yeah, I realized I was glorifying the villains, and it's too late to call it off now because people are patting me on the back and telling me what a genius I am. So I can't like end the event now. But Lois was absolutely right. I'm glorifying villains. What have I done? And Clark says, Jimmy, I think we need to humanize supervillains a little bit. So again, that to me, that's Jimmy and Clark right there. Again, you can do whatever you want, Jimmy Olsen, as long as that is intact. And Supergirl, the show, has something similar to that, where we fundamentally, we make Jimmy Olsen like a dashing, tall, dashing black man, which initially it's like, that's not Jimmy Olsen, but the way they sold it in the show was, okay, this is a Jimmy Olsen years into his friendship with Clark Kent, where he kind of is emulating Superman. We're like, okay, that makes sense. It's something like that.
Mm-hmm.
The point is, like, good balance on Jimmy Olsen's. That's a long-winded way of getting.
I'm sorry, Dragon. I don't have much to add because it's literally, it sounds like World War III outside, and I kind of just want to wrap this up. I'm
again, it's
not the fault of your own or the fault of the work or anything. Just if that's what we get for doing something on the 4th of July, we take the good with the bad.
Well, yeah, it's authenticity. It's not really a problem, Tiki.
Do you like it? Do you actually legitimately like?
Well, so far it's not getting in the way. So I mean, but again,
okay. I mean, because I'm kind of like self-conscious about it, which is why I'm going back and forth with the muting. But anyways,
anyway, so talk about Pete Ross a little. Here's the whole it's the crux of the argument, the big argument between friends.
All I can say about Pete Ross is that I very much had experiences like this. I actually had, not to get too personal, but I had a group of friends, Dragon. I call it the New Mexico Exodus. And this happened when I was about 20 years old. And it was like about a group of like 4 friends who all, like, one of them's parents lived in New Mexico, and they all moved out to New Mexico. And one by one, they all kind of trickled back, and it was in this kind of like sheepish, like tail tucked between their legs kind of fashion. You know what I mean? And that was kind of like almost an opposite experience where it's like, I'm not like super urban, but I live in the Bay Area. I live close to San Francisco, so, there's towns and cities all around us. Whereas out there in New Mexico, it's fucking Breaking Bad land. You know what I mean? It's like desert all around you. So,
quote Mike Ehrmantraut from Better Call Saul from the 5-0 episode, Albuquerque, New Mexico. I was rewatching that episode. It's like that line delivery still sticks out to me. The way Jonathan Banks, like, he name drops where he's going, to the bartender. Albuquerque, New Mexico. He just says.
Dare I say it? Is that maybe the Breaking Bad equivalent to Dunkirk?
Well, not as famous, but yes, it is sort of like, it's kind of like the. To be fair, though, it's like that's a line that kind of sums up Mark Rylance there. Like, he has that presence. Like, to be fair, like, we have all sorts of lines with Mike, like lawyer,
lawyer.
Anyway,
yeah.
Let's see. So, with the whole, the argument with Pete, I like that Pete. He's mainly arguing. It's like when you're arguing, but you're arguing about something else entirely. He's like, basically, they're calling each other out on like certain kind of delusions that the two of them have. Where the real argument is that he can't protect his friend because he's kind of gotten too big to protect. He has this giant target on him, a literal target on his chest, which means he can't protect his friend like he did back in issue 2, where like he took out like someone with a shovel. We basically saying, no, folks, we're not doing. It's not the Smallville days. We're in kind of the Donner days, where we can't do kind of that long form storytelling. Like, yeah, there's that friend in the small town who can help him out. So Clark's root issue in this issue, sorry, is is that he doesn't know his heritage, and we have this really cool moment. Again, I love how we're using the DC universe all throughout this year, where he in the heat of this argument, he flies to the moon. He attempts to fly to the moon very foolishly. In doing so, he burns through his clothes, and he has this he could run out of air. Like, he can last for roughly 3 hours if he takes a breath, but again, if he's not focusing, it could be dangerous for him. He runs into the Green Lantern Corps. He runs into the Big Two. He runs into Abin Sur, who, of course, when that guy dies, you get Hal Jordan, and Tomar Ray, kind of one of the sidekicks to Hal Jordan. The point is, he runs into these Green Lanterns, and he gets the first reference of Krypton. He's Kryptonian. He's from Krypton. Like, oh my god! And the decompression, because he flew suddenly into space without like preparation, and he's suffering from decompression sickness, which gets us yet again a belligerent, drunken Clark Kent, with essentially with kind of it's not just daddy issues, but just kind of like heritage issues of like, where's Krypton? I can shoot lasers from my eyes. It's just, he's very, again, we can't make Superman foolish, but we can make Clark Kent everybody's fool. It's fine, because we do it all the time with Christopher Reeve, make him mumbling. We can make him a little foolish. It's fine.
Alrighty.
So, I guess. We already went over the American parallel. So yeah, we're all good there. Let's go to episode 7. Then. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Issue 7. Which is
Dragon, this Lobo conversation, like, tell me this didn't feel Sandman-esque to me. This very much felt like a deconstruction of the comic book genre as a whole, which is, of course, exactly what Sandman is.
It feels, if not Neil Gaiman-esque, it feels Alan Moore-esque. I'll give you that. It feels kind of. Bear in mind, those two guys are in a very similar wheelhouse. They're kind of like, basically, Neil Gaiman is the more approachable version of Alan Moore.
Yes. And of course, Neil Gaiman made that famous, like, unofficial cameo in Steven Universe.
Yes, and also, folks, he has a really great. They did something really great with Neil Gaiman in Lucifer, which is really smart.
Oh man! Okay.
Again, Lucifer is a spinoff of the Sandman comics, so again, that whole thing is kind of a slow build to the Sandman in a way.
Wait, Lucifer is a slow build to Sandman?
Okay, no, let me be clear there. I'm just saying that Lucifer. I'm saying now we're getting more seasons of Lucifer. There's always the possibility of getting more Sandman.
I had no idea Lucifer was tied into Sandman. None.
You know that? No. We do stuff from the Sandman book. Is like mainly characters and ideas from the Sandman with Lucifer are in that show, Tiki. It's just
all right. Well, this is a conversation we have to have later.
Anyway, okay, let me get back to the. Okay, so this is issue 7 is Valkyrie, and it is again. So now we've gone from Angel as that Clark Kent is no angel in that story, to issue 7, which is Valkyrie, and is done by a really great artist. So this is the artist that worked with Scott Snyder before he did the Court of Owls stuff. This is like the first time Snyder worked on Batman, the good Snyder, New York Snyder, folks, New York Snyder. God. Scott Snyder worked with an artist just by the kind of the lone moniker of Jock, and that's the guy who did the art for this one. He's a very kind of it's a very unique style. It's a cool style. And this is probably my third, my second or third favorite of all the stories in this. Really, I really love this issue. It's this one thematically is about enemies. The last one was about friends. This one's about enemies.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a really this to me I think is the second smartest issue of the entire.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not quite as high on it just because, like, again, if I'm kind of like ranking them all, to me, I really love the origin stuff of issues 1 through 3. And then I feel like issue 5 was probably the high point. So I got to admit, Dragon, it's not really a competition, but this is probably, like, I don't want to say I was underwhelmed by the ending, but I almost kind of got a bit of like, oh, that's the end? Okay, I didn't even think we were gearing up for an ending.
I'll give you that.
And maybe that's because of the structure of the book itself, you know what I mean? Maybe it's because of the whole, like, the photo album quality to the storytelling here. Maybe that's it, but I don't know. I got to say, like I said, I wasn't disappointed in the ending. It just felt like this didn't necessarily, like, I guess it does have the philosophical kind of like tying together all the genres and tropes, but I don't know, something felt a little bit off with it. I can't put my finger on it. And like I said, I do blame the fact that I kind of marathon this all in one sitting too.
Well,
So
here's the interesting thing, Tiki. I think what it is. I think what the issue might be, and I think the ending thing you pointed out was it does have somewhat of an abrupt ending. It's a good ending, but it's kind of like, okay, that's the end. And here's something that was initially planned for this. I found out, again, reading, like, when you get the collected trade, it like tells you about the pitches for the story. And Landis had, remember how we have the backup stories. So again, there were at least supposed to be two more. We only have five like little backup stories, and issue 6 and 7 do not have those back stories. We do not have this back issue, like one page, kind of old capper stories that we have with the other ones. Now, the last one was supposed to be a really important one that didn't make it, and I got to tell you, in retrospect, I kind of wish it was there after learning about it.
well, yeah, I mean, I feel like a little something at the end would have tied everything together really well, and it just, besides that, it's just kind of like a break in the formula, which always bothers my OCD. So, it'd be like if Watchmen didn't wrap up the whole, the whole Sea Captain storyline.
Well, here's what the original ending was. This take, it was really cool. It was basically you were going to see Jor-El's last moments on Krypton, like the one record. One second, I have it right in front of me right here. Here's the pitch. a deeply alien Jor-El runs through the collapsing Krypton. As the world tumbles around him, he barely escapes an enraged General Zod, receiving a fatal injury. Again, kind of Man of Steel-esque, I gotta tell you. He places the tiny, deeply, I don't know if he's saying deeply or deeply, the tiny alien Kal-El into a survival pod, basically the thing we saw in the Jonathan Kent flashback from issue 1. Before he launches it, he sets the pod to adapt DNA. It's a setting. As the pod launches and Krypton fades to white, we hear Jor-El's final thoughts. As in, it's a word balloon, so it's not a pre-recorded message. Again, otherwise we would fundamentally change what the whole story is about. So, like, Jor-El's like one little thought, but it's probably a silent issue, and then we get this one thought, but this one thing said. Here's the one thing it said, Tiki. The whole thing would have ended like this. Wherever you land, ... you will belong. I gotta tell you, that'd be a pretty sweet capper.
Yeah, for sure.
Again, we see that he didn't belong.
But I guess in terms of like the ending that we do get, Dragon, I guess it's kind of like again, it's a reflection of the American dream, and it's kind of like, we all want a happy ending. And I got to tell you, Dragon, I'm sorry. Again, I don't mean to get so personal here, but you know what happened last summer with this whole "I love you" business, and it did not go so well for me. So it's like, all right, Clark, he kind of got the ending that I wish I would have gotten with the "I love you" side of things. Good on him.
Let's build to the "I love you" for a moment.
Okay.
We have a lot of really cool stuff that happens here. So there's a lot of really great stuff here. And again, honestly, I think all the ideas, especially with the American thing we've been building, I think this is where it all comes into fruition here. So we have this. So this, again, we've been using Superman very sparingly. We got kind of a taste of our year one Superman in issue 5. Superman is just kind of like a publicity stunt in issue 6, and now this issue is he's full blown Superman. This is the big full blown Superman story, and it's not. I love that it's not about destruction. It's not about like a big fight. It's about pain in a way. It's really about.
But it's about an exchange of ideologies too.
Yes, and it's very fascinating. So again, I love I love all the ideas of this story here. Where okay, here's the American parallel. It's really fascinating. I think that, and again, folks, we have to speculate about how much of this is intentional. I think this last one though has to be intentional. If I can bet on one thing being intentional, it has to be this last one though.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a very striking 9/11 parallel in this last issue, because the first image is almost like that Spider-Man image from the 9/11, the Spider-Man, the Spider-Man 9/11 issue that we covered, years ago, where it's Superman with there's this building that was just destroyed, and you see like the smoke coming from the top of it. It's just been like decimated, and you have like this lone Superman kind of hovering like buildings and buildings across, and he says, "Oh my God." So again, that image feels very kind of like it's kind of a 9/11 parallel as well as kind of a Superman now. It's like if we had Superman in the world today, I mean, there's definitely an anti-terrorism element to this episode. I'm sorry, I keep saying episode because I think there's like an installment of this chapter. You know, it seeing kind of alien threats, and we're kind of connecting the dots between an alien threat, which of course the whole American alien role. You know, Clark as kind of an alien who could be perceived as a threat, with an actual threat, with an actual kind of terror. Basically, Lobo being perceived, like him killing people, him like decimating this building as a terrorist attack. So I kind of love how we smartly kind of looked at kind of the paranoia that we always play with Superman now. Of like, will we be able to accept a being of such power? Win that idea over the fact that, hey, you know, it's in kind of the scary times that we live in now, we would hope to have a guy like Superman on our sides in the face of like terrorist attacks like this, especially if it's in like a higher form of war with like an alien creature like Lobo.
Right.
So Lobo himself. So Lobo is fascinating. Tiki, did you know anything about Lobo before reading this?
You know, I've heard the name before. I can't put my finger on it.
Tiki, you get closer to the mic, Tiki.
Well, it might be because of the fireworks, but maybe you can shed some light on this. I seem to remember seeing Lobo in an animated thing that we've covered at some point.
Sorry, you want me to shed light on Lobo?
No, do you remember anything that we've covered that had Lobo in it? Because I seem to remember something that had Lobo in it. But
all right. I think I heard what you said, T. But you're coming kind of faint, like away.
Well, I don't know what to tell you, man. I'm literally like leaning right into the microphone. Like this is like we better just wrap it up if we're having issues like this.
All right. Okay. So well, I remember Lobo from the animated series. That
I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm having a little trouble hearing you, but
well, that's just fucking great, man. Come on, we've been going 2 hours. Let's wrap this up.
All right. Okay, we'll wrap it up then. All right. So.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to get snippy. It's just I literally have no solution to the audio problems. We're just gonna have to roll with it here.
All right. Okay, let me say something about Lobo, and then we'll just okay. So on the whole, my Lobo points I want to hit here. So again, I think Lobo he's basically an alien bounty hunter, and he's kind of the perfect choice of a villain for this piece because he's played very accurately. He's played very much how you do Lobo. He's the cynical counterpoint to Superman's optimism, which we've been building up, and it makes great sense. And this is where the big idea of the whole piece, where we've had like a Superman who doesn't know where he heralds from. You just got a little nugget of Krypton, and it's such a heartbreaking scene for Superman when he learns. When basically Lobo callously breaks the news to him that Krypton, because he asks, like, "Are you Kryptonian? You're kind of like me. Are you Kryptonian? Are you an alien?" And he says, like, "Oh, Krypton. No, that place exploded years ago. You know, we rounded up the skulls and we did horrible things with the Kryptonian skulls. Like, oh my god, it's so heartbreaking." So I love the emotional content of this whole fight. I love the
reflects on the whole American alien of it all. You know, kind of feeling more outcast than literally like your whole civilization, your whole species dying off. Kind of like the big crescendo of all those themes.
It is the crescendo. Yes, it's it's this. He's just ragging on Superman's worldview, and then we get this great bit where this is kind of Landis really. This is sort of the we kind of talked about this before, like the works of Zack Snyder, where it's sort of like the whole "Are you a man?" It's kind of the "Are you a man?" moment here, where it's sort of like
He's only a man if he gets raped in prison.
Yeah, this is sort of the Max Landis is like, Superman is so metal, man. We're basically this is like the tough guy. This is how you do like a tough guy Superman in a way where again Superman, you're on his side with this because he's just been decimated emotionally here, where he says, "I'm going to shove that bike." Basically, the line you see before you folks, and there's the idea is like the world hears Superman say. It's like a big moment they build, like, let's link up the audio, and they hear this, like, the first thing Superman says. Then he goes to town on Lobo, and it's a really brutal, realistic fight, like we set up in issue 2. So again, it all comes to fruition, and it just builds to this great point of, Clark has this line where it says, "I'm not from Krypton. I'm from Kansas," and he does the Babe Ruth point. So again, another American symbol here, where he says, what are you going to do?" And he points upwards. Is it like Babe Ruth? He would point with the bat, like, "I'm going to send this like a home run. I'm going to knock it out of the stadium." He throws Lobo into space, and the world's in shock, having watched this whole fight break out. And I just love that in the aftermath of all this, in the aftermath of the super fight, we have a real world impact of. It was so brutal, yet it had a happy ending that Superman, he saved all these people through a brutal action, but he saved all of these people. Again, Lobo's alive. Problem is, he's kind of a healing factor. He'll be fine. And in a way, we really humanized Superman on a global level, where people saw him get beat up and they were rooting for him. And it was kind of this. It speaks to the whole pieces where we're humanizing Superman every way we can, both emotionally and metaphysically with the Mixie Spitalik stuff. We're doing it all sorts of ways here. But again, even on a physical level, we humanize him in the public eye, and in the end, we ended the most human of ways. I'm sorry?
Sure.
Oh, sorry. That's my own reverberation.
Okay, sorry.
Anyway, so the last just thing, we have the Clark and Lois ending where Clark gets. This is what Tiki I think you're speaking to here, where it's just the whole. It's the American. It's kind of the old movie ending, like you get the girl in the end. Isn't that nice? And he does. Yeah. All right. His final thoughts.
Yeah, final thoughts. Like I said, Dragon, I guess going into it, I wasn't expecting the photo album format, so I was a little thrown off by that. It wasn't quite as consistent of a story as I was kind of expecting. It's a book that's very much filled with big ideas and interesting ideas, and it's almost kind of like again, just to kind of bring the alien analogy home. Are you ready for this?
Yeah, sure.
It's almost kind of like, all right, we got Superman, we got him all the operating table. Let's slice him open. Let's dissect him. Let's see what makes him tick. You know what I mean? It's like if we have to do an autopsy on Superman in a good way, this is kind of it. It's sort of like taking out all the pieces of Superman and seeing what really makes him work as a character. It's almost kind of like a greatest hits of Superman in a way, and really like it. I wouldn't mind if we had a follow up in this kind of style. It's very much
with the changing art styles and the philosophical, definitely Sandman for me. And for that reason, I like it a lot. Like I said, the hype for this thing was pretty astronomical, so I don't necessarily think it lived up to the hype, and that's not the book's fault at all. It's just kind of like, years of you kind of telling me about it, and sort of years of mishaps and hands on the thing leading to this. But I digress. At the end of the day, very, very good storytelling from Landis. Really interesting and a good kind of counterpoint in discussion for 4th and 5.
Yeah. For me, so my final thoughts are, this is this in 2015. So bear in mind the story got started in issues in 2015, wrapped up like 2016. But the point is, let's just say the comics even of 2015 for this. The story as a whole, this and that Gods and Monsters Superman issue, like the issue of the comic of about that Benjamin Bratt Superman that we all love. Oh. That Superman. Those two comics were my favorite Superman comics of 2015. Honestly, some of my favorite comics period of 2015, because the following year you get the Paul Dini Dark Knight, a True Batman sort of thing. Those 2 years are really strong for comics. And I mean, this story to me was brilliant, fascinating. I agree with you. It's a world I'd love to see explored again. Look, there were plans. Let's just say there were plans to explore. Like there's going to be like a big Batman Superman story continuation of this, and there's also going to be like a Wonder Woman offshoot. Basically, we do like an American Alien version of Wonder Woman, which sounded really fascinating. Again, something Landis wanted to do. But let's just say without getting into it, I doubted. Unfortunately, I doubt it'll ever come back, and I think that's a real shame because again, this is a universe I wish was almost like with the New 52.
We're going to see continuation of the American Alien line, but I very much think something in the same sort of like photo album style we could see eventually.
Yeah, that would be smart storytelling. I'd love to see it done in any route that we could. I'd love to see it. Yeah.
I haven't read this, but I've heard of it in a like Best of Comics compilation. Are you familiar with Marvels?
Yeah, Marvels. Yeah, the 1980 the 1980 set Marvel story.
It's the one where it's like from the photographer's point of view.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. Like that to me is kind of like I kind of get that same sort of vibe where it's like it's sort of like a ground level look at superhero-dom. You know what I mean? And I would like to see more of that kind of storytelling in comics, but obviously we don't want all comics it very much is kind of like a good use of like an off-brand kind of like Elseworld storytelling.
Yeah.
All right.
So, so again, let's see. Lastly, so, what am I getting at here? So I just think Landis outdid himself on this story, and again, there's a welcome, refreshing take on Superman. I can't say enough nice things about it. It gets to the heart of why I think it gets to the heart of why we associate Superman with with America, with the whole truth, justice, the American way, and it lets us, importantly, and this is where I think the American comes into play here. It lets us see the influence of America on him, and I think that was. And whether it's intentional or not, I really loved it. I like that you can draw those lines, hence kind of the 4th of July pick for all this. But regardless, we would have talked about this anyway, folks. It's a great story. It's
This has actually been one of the podcasts that's kind of been building for a while. It was one of those podcasts that was going to be inevitable for us eventually. So yeah.
Right. I mean, in many respects, this is the equivalent. Again, like it is kind of the equivalent for me for with the Superman story. Is kind of the one that just had me so wrapped up and entrenched in it, like with Dark Knight, a true Batman story. It's not to the same effect, but it's kind of in that same vein of like kind of like a mind blowing Superman story. So I mean, I was very happy with this. And again, in the future, if we can do something close to this, I think it'd be good for Superman. Again, who knows? For all we know, we could be doing that now in the Superman comics. But again, I think just kind of these. Kind of like an Elseworld sort of like basically it's so funny when we do like an Elseworlds like something outside that main continuity, we can get a lot more gutsy and bold, and I think that's where we get the best storytelling with certain characters. Where basically there's not that pressure of like, okay, you can't do certain things and you have to abide by, we have to set up certain things for future stories. When you have that freedom, I think just get some really good storytelling from it. If you want to just tell, like every comic is somebody's first comic, that sort of mentality is kind of what you want to approach Superman with. And again, each issue of this is like a story fundamentally about Clark Kent. If you don't invest in Clark Kent, it's really understand Superman.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for watching our conversation on this, folks. We hope we hit on some important topics with America and the state that our country's in right now, and sort of how we could do better and whatnot, and so on and so forth. I don't want to get too political, but have a happy 4th of July, folks, and be kind to each other. God damn it. Be kind to each other.